My name's Jill Rowe, and in this episode of the Different Podcast, I chat with Steve Chalke about one of the Oasis 9 habits, being hopeful. From starting with the beauty of white hair through to the wisdom of St Augustine of Hippo, from recognising the world of difference between wishful thinking and the fierce reality of hope, we talk about how hope sweats as we take the steps needed to bring about the better future we imagine. We chat about the importance of elders of hope, those who have gone before and know the way. This was such a hope-fueling conversation. We pray you find it so too. Steve Chalke.
Jill Rowe.
Oh, it's nice to use surnames, isn't it? It's very formal.
It's great we still recognise one another.
Although we have got exactly the same hair colour.
Yes, we have.
Which I think has confused your grandchildren sometimes when they were very little.
White hair.
Because you're the fun master for them, and they look like, and it's some kind of weird imposter that appears every so often. So.
The funny thing is, I had to go to the King's Road in Chelsea. This is before the lockdowns. Yeah, I don't know what. I mean,
to get your clothes.
I've only been there about 3 times in my life. Oh, I had to go and have a coffee with someone.
Okay.
I was meeting someone, and I don't really know my way around that place at all, you know, because I come from South London, not the posh bit. But I went. There was a coffee shop, and I got there early, so I had to wait for this person. And so I went to this coffee shop, and it was the most extraordinary coffee shop because it was a coffee shop out front, and it was also a hairdresser.
Oh,
there you are. There aren't many of those. Yeah. So you could sit out the front. It was in the summer, but you had to go in to buy your coffee. They didn't come out to serve you, as I found out. And I went in to get my coffee, and there was this hairdresser there. Hairdressers there. One of the hairdressers looked at me and said, "I love your hair." And then he said, "Where did you get it done?" And
do you know what? I get this all the time.
Where did I get it done? He said, "That white." Yeah. He said, How did you
get that
How
colour?
did you get it dyed white like that? And I said to him, who on earth would choose to have their hair dyed white just to make them look wretchedly old before they were? And he said, it's all the thing.
That's the thing.
It's all the thing, he said, but yours must be so expensive because you can normally tell from, I don't know how they could tell, you know, it's really hard, he was explaining to me, get pure white. You just can't do it. And he said, you know, you've got pure white. I said, well, you know, just live a life filled with stress and it comes to you naturally and it's ever so cheap.
I know. And do you know what, Steve? I get exactly the same.
Do you really?
Where do you get your hair coloured? And I have people who touch it sometimes on the bus, your hair. Anyway, there you go.
It's a weird world, isn't it?
It is a weird world. I thought it would be really good. I thought, a slight tangent.
Yeah.
We are going to talk.
I've learned something there, though.
Yeah. This, I think, white hair is a beautiful thing. Anyway, we are going to talk today about one of the Oasis 9 habits, because I thought it would be great if we explored these, and because, you know, we have this joy of navigating so much around these things. So we have 9 habits in Oasis, which we talk about as an invitation to a way of life, characterised by being humble and hopeful and honest and compassionate and considerate and self-controlled and patient and joyful and forgiving. And they are a glorious gift to us as a family. And I thought it would be fascinating to talk about being hopeful with you today. And you've got this, you use a quote, don't you?
Yeah, I know what
you did it on the radio, actually, the other week.
Yeah, the other week I was on Radio 2 and I did it. It's a fantastic quote. Got a lot of great response from it. And it comes from Augustine of Hippo, St Augustine, he's sometimes called, who lived in the 4th century. And Augustine said, hope has 2 beautiful daughters. The first is called anger at the way things are. The second is named courage that things will not remain that way. And I've always found that quote, that saying or whatever it is, which I've known for years, decades, I suppose. I've always found it inspiring. Hope has two beautiful daughters. The anger is beautiful. It's not anger at a person. It's anger at a system. It's anger at injustice. Well, that's how I define it. It's anger at inequality. It's anger at loss of opportunity for a child, a young person. Yeah. It's anger that an elderly person who should be respected is just left and abandoned, in a care home, and there's no one there for them, etc., etc., etc. They live with that loneliness or whatever it is. It's anger at that. But that is no good without the other sister, the courage to do something about it, to say it must change and to work for it. And I think that, for me, is hope, because hope can otherwise be this flimsy thing.
Absolutely.
Like not so long ago, we went through a general election and everybody was singing again that song, things, the Dream song, things can only get better. I'm not going to sing it. No. The
Save
line.
That for another time.
Yeah, things can, I almost did then, didn't I? Can only get better. And as I've just demonstrated, they can get a whole lot worse when I start singing. So why do we believe things can only get better? Things can and do get worse. So this kind of chin up, look on the bright side, be cheerful, it's all going to be okay. Well, people say, well, why? So hope has to be real.
That's
tough,
what I was going to say,
take things on.
Yeah, hope deals with reality, not wishful thinking, doesn't it? Is a ruggedness. I often say that hope sweats. Like there's a reality to it, which is about reality, and it's not. You have to face it head on. I was listening to Rob Bell's podcast the other day, and he was talking about facing things with a fierce reality, like not denying if things are rubbish or bad or need to be changed or there's injustice and things are wrong. Hope actually just says, no way should things be like that. And like you say, gets on and does something about it. It sweats.
Yeah. One of the things I learned, but I learned more recently because I went to theological college where I studied. Yeah, well, not actually, but in theological college, we had to study Greek, which is what the New Testament of the Bible is written in, and Hebrew, which is what the Old Testament of the Bible is written in. And I wasn't very good at it at the time. I couldn't see the point of it, to tell you the truth. Yeah. It's like when I learned French at school. Yeah. Nobody in our school ever told us there was a country called France. Literally, honestly. So we're learning all these French verbs, and you think, what? This is just gobbledygook. If only they'd taken us to Calais, we'd have worked out there's a place called France. I mean, we knew France existed, but there was no hope we'd ever go there. Yeah. See, so it's anyway. Yeah, at college I was supposed to do Greek and Hebrew, and the only Hebrew I knew ran a little tailor shop up the road. He's kind of like anyway. Since leaving college, with this sense of purpose and mission, I need to mine theology and understand. So the funny thing about the Hebrew language, funny for us, is it's very sensory based. It's very tangible. It's very real. So the words are full of things that you can see and taste and touch and feel, etc. It's not very conceptual. It's very concrete in that way. So, for instance, I often say this because I learned this early on. One of the words for anger in Hebrew, there's several words for anger, but one of them is actually just literally the word nose. And so you're reading a line of Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, and it's, this isn't a line of ancient Hebrew. You say, so he got out of bed and he kicked the bucket and he was feeling very, and there's this word, auf, it is, which can mean nose or angry. And so in the context of the sentence, you work out that he couldn't be feeling very nose because he kicked the bucket. So it must mean angry in that case. Whereas a sentence that says, and he'd had a cold for ages and he blew his, well, it's got to mean nose. He wouldn't be blew his anger. So why is the Hebrew word for anger the same as the Hebrew word for nose? It's because when you're angry, you breathe more heavily and your nostrils flare. So the connection was made.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So that's what I mean about it being a concrete language.
Yeah.
So it turns out that one of the words for hope used in the Hebrew Bible, the ancient Hebrew Bible, comes from exactly the same root as the word for rope, a multi-stranded cord, a strong cord. It's been woven together for strength. And what it's saying is hope has to be a strong rope, a multi-stranded rope. It's no good having it. It's got to be. When you're down a hole, it's no good someone shouting down, hang on there, it'll all be okay. You need someone to lower down a rope, and it's got to be a strong rope that when you cling to it and you're halfway out, doesn't break and you fall back in. So hope has to be tangible, has to be real. And I think sometimes hope becomes a flimsy word in our language. It's like a fob off. Oh, I've listened to your complaints. Oh, well, I'll get better. Have a bit of hope. Why?
Yeah. So in that way, you're saying it's we portray being hopeful as a feeling, but actually it's an action.
It's a set of actions. It's a set of actions, and it's real tangible help from someone else.
Yeah.
It might be something you can do.
Yeah.
It might be something that others do for you. But hope, if it's not tangible, it's hopeless.
Yeah. Just on the rope thing, an illustration that I've used a few times is historically in the North American plains, the farmers, there were numbers of farmers that would die when the blizzards came because they'd be out trying to herd their cattle back in and to shelter, and they couldn't find their way back from the fields into their farmhouses or to the sheds where they were trying to bring the cattle. And so what they did, which I think is really interesting with your, now knowing what you've discovered with that, is what they started to do was they would tie a rope to the farmhouse, to the shed, to the fence, so that when they were then going to the field where the cattle were, they would take the rope with them, tie it round something so it was straight and solid, and then bring the cattle back, and they could find their way home by holding on to the rope that they'd put there. I've always thought, no, that's it. That's exactly that's hope. That's how it looks. And for me, one of the questions I think, we talk about being hopeful. I think there's a really important question for us, which is to consider how we are bringers of hope into communities, into the places we work, into and who are the elders of hope? Because, if you think of the summer we've just had, it's been an interesting summer in the UK in some communities, isn't it? It's been interesting is probably very much the wrong word. It's been a really difficult summer. And communities in the UK, there are communities that feel like there is a lack of hope, and in a lack of hope, in a space where there's a lack of hope, narratives that are not great and don't build us together as communities.
No, where there is a lack of hope, all sorts of other narratives pour into that.
Exactly, in the vacuum.
Don't they? There's an emptiness, and you see that, in my view, in the rise of popularism, as it gets called, around the world, don't you? So people with nothing. Yeah. It's a strange thing to say in this context, but Martin Luther King, who I'll tell you a story about in a moment or two, but one of the things Martin Luther King said as the civil rights movement got going in the States, he was always a non-violence. He opposed all violence in all shapes and forms. But from time to time, the civil rights thing descended into unrest and riots and rioting. And he got asked about that several times on TV, etc. And what he said back then was, I oppose violence. I oppose violence all of the time. But sometimes the riot is the only weapon that those who have no hope hold. Yeah. So even though he stood back from it, he could see the frustration and the anger that boiled up and made this thing happen. And I think as we look back on the summer in the UK, without condoning any violence at all, violence is, it achieves nothing. And but we also have to say, so why are there so many people who feel locked out, shut out,
how did we get
unheard?
here?
How did we get here? And I think if we ask that, America has to ask that of itself at the same time, and many other societies.
Yeah.
When people are given no hope, no freedom, no rope to hang on to find their way through life, that frustration boils over in some.
Yeah, absolutely. So as individuals, what do we need to do in our own lives to become the kind of people who have hope ourselves, but can bring hope to others' lives?
One of the things is just constantly investing in other people, isn't it? Because we talked about this in another episode, didn't we? The Greenbelt thing just recently, this big festival in the summer in lots of fields. I'm old, I suppose. It was amazing to me. Honestly, endless people, endless. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds would come up to me and say, "Oh, Steve, I remember when you came and spoke to us, or you did that, or I joined this." That's a really funny thing. This is very elderly man. He was very old, and this is unkind things. He had a bit of a Joe Biden walk. He
wasn't so sure on his feet.
Yeah, and he came up to me, and he really did look very elderly and unsteady, and he said, "Oh, I haven't seen you for years." He said, "The last time I saw you, you came and spoke to my youth group." I swear, I thought, oh no, but you came and spoke to my youth group, and I remember what you said, and it really changed my life. And that is honestly true. But I think we can bring hope. We can bring direction. I met a guy, actually I talked to him just the other day because I'm working on a project with him now. So this guy, thought at the beginning of this year, he lives in America, and he came to see me, which is a strange thing to do. And somebody told him I was here, and then he asked if he'd go and have a meal with me. And I went, and he said, 35 years ago, I was in an audience and I listened to you speaking, and I was really stuck. My life was just whoa. And he said, what you said just like changed everything. I said, what was it? Because I thought I'd write it down and say it again. He couldn't remember what it was either. But anyway, he came from Europe. He went to the States. He founded a business. He founded several businesses. He's done it incredibly well for himself. And what he wanted to say to me is, he actually said in his terms, I've made a lot of money. I want to do something now with my life that's totally in line with what the values that first called me. And he's working on a project with Oasis now, which is fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic. But you realise, like, just turning up and doing the thing, whatever the thing is, whether you're tired, whether you want to sit down, just go in again and invest in, that does bring hope.
Yeah, and I use this expression, being elders of hope. And I always think about elders. I don't mean elders in like some church scenario. I mean elders of the tribe, elders of a village, Generally, the elders would be people are maybe a little bit ahead in the journey, just a little bit, maybe, but they've been there and they know the way. Yeah. And so there's kind of a grace to a person. That's so for that guy, he listened to it and thought, do you know what? That Steve Chalke's, it sounds like knows what he's talking about with this. However, like, and we all know that we're not the finished article and all the rest of it. But I think there is something about just being the kind of person that says, if you just try doing it like this and because that worked for me.
Yeah.
And so you're investing, like you say, you're investing in other lives in that way.
Smile, cross the room, sit down, ask someone about themselves, listen to them. Instead of saying, I always think I'm not very good at it a lot of the time, instead of saying, walking into a room at a party or wherever it is and saying, here I am, say to yourself, there you are. I'm going to go and find out about you. I'm going to listen to you. It's an extraordinary thing that in the ordinary, hope is passed on.
Yeah.
Then I think for myself as well, back to my anxiousness, I watch the news or listen to the news. Cornelia, my wife, she's sometimes say it's too depressing. We've got to turn it off. Yeah. Whereas I think I've got to listen to this, and then it's like I got to do something about this if I can. Do you know? And I think over the years, it's a strange thing now as looking back on it. Oasis, you know, I don't mean me, I mean Oasis and all the extraordinary people in it doing such amazing jobs at, you know, in education, in justice and in housing and in politics and, you know, all that kind of, and I think, you know, because I was the first one in the door type of thing, it's an amazing thing that if you just go at stuff you don't understand, you know, I didn't understand education or housing or justice or anything, you know, churches, but I'm just going to give it a go because I'm going to do the bit. And it's amazing how something grows up, isn't it? So in our brokenness and in our half-knowingness and in our not-knowingness, still we can bring hope to people. There's a go on. You say you
no.
Want
I was
to say
just going
something.
to say it makes me think about what are the opposites to hope, and I think to that point, cynicism, excessive positivity. I don't think is what hope is. You know, I think that's like a complete mask.
Yes. Well, it's got to be real. It's got to be tangible, doesn't it?
Lack of participation, just talking about it, not doing it. All of those kind of things. And back to your original point, probably about, you know, anger and courage. You know, that is it Psalm 40, where the writer says, "How long to sing this song?" And I think for me that like kind of that anthem, and you know, U2's version is brilliant, obviously, but how long to sing the song about this? I want to sing a new. It's the new song, and I think that is what an elder of hope is always doing. It's a person is dealing with the pain and the frustration and the anger that they're experiencing at what they're seeing, i.e. watching the news, but declaring, I'm here for a different story. Yeah. And this is where I'm putting my energy.
I was going to tell you a story. You know, I'm nearly butted on what you're saying, which would be bad. So I shut myself up quickly. But I was going to tell you a story about a guy who, Jonathan Sacks, you know, the famous Jewish chief rabbi in this country, used to tell. He used to tell the story about Yitzhak Perlman. Yitzhak Perlman is very elderly now, but a worldwide famous violinist. But when he was, I think he was 4, when he got polio, and as a result of that, he spent his whole life. He's in a wheelchair now. He still plays the violin brilliantly all over the world, but he comes on in a motorised wheelchair. But for most of his career, he used to come on with those calipers on his legs. And there's a very famous story that I think he was playing at Carnegie Hall, and he's the first violinist, you know, he's virtuoso, et cetera, et cetera. So the audience is gathered and the orchestra's gathered and the conductor's gathered. And then there's this moment when everybody is anticipated. And then Perlman comes on the stage and he'd walk always painfully, said Jonathan Sacks, with his calipers on his legs and with crutches. And with his violin propped by one of his crutches, and he slowly made his way, as he always did, across the stage, and the whole audience is waiting because it takes forever. And then he sits in his chair, and then when he sits in his chair, Jonathan Sacks said he took off his calipers. He'd take off his calipers and he'd tuck one of his legs behind him, and then he'd get his his violin up, and then he began to play. And on this night in Carnegie Hall, he was going to perform this extraordinary piece of music. It began with this dramatic violin solo, and this hush descends, and Perlman, Yitzhak, starts playing, and he's only played a bar or two, and then there was this twang, and it echoed round the Carnegie Hall in New York, and one of the strings was broken, and there was a silence, and the whole audience is thinking, what happens now? He's got to go off stage and get another string, and he's got to tune up, so he's got to untuck his leg, he's got to put his calipers on, he's got to wander off the stage, they've got to put this, then he's got to come back. This is like a 15-minute wait until we start again. So there was this long silence with broken string, and then Perlman picked up his violin again and motioned to the conductor, and he began that solo piece again, and he played it brilliantly. Jonathan Sachs said he was transposing all the time. He was playing in different positions, etc., because he only had 3 strings to use. He was kind of making it up as he went along, but he played it perfectly on just 3 strings. And at the end of the piece, the audience erupted in, couldn't believe what they'd just seen and heard. And Perlman bowed and spoke, and he said, all my life I've been learning to play with what remains. And that's hope, isn't it? Because life never runs right for any of us, does it? And, there's all sorts of things in my life that, I could wish were different, and it haven't turned out that way, and it didn't happen that way. But we're all in that pit. But there's a rope, a strong rope. And for me, that rope, I suppose, in the end, it isn't my trust in anyone except the universe is personal, and I am made by God, and I'm given a commission to introduce his love to others. That becomes the rope, not only for others, I hope, in some way, but it becomes it for me. It makes sense of my life. It gives me purpose. It means my little story, my broken story, my 3 strings instead of 4-string story. Well, actually, it's about 1 string left in my but that broken story plays into a bigger story than me. That brings personal hope, but it also, to your expression, hope. I hope it makes you, in some small measure, an elder of hope, did you say, for others. That it's contagious, isn't it?
Hope is contagious. Thank you, Steve.